Hi, I'm Barry Worthington. I'm a filmmaker, director, writer, actor. The list goes on and on. If you don't know me, you can check out more about my films at limitlessfilms.com. You can also follow me right now. I'm on Instagram at BarryMakesFilms, Vimeo, and YouTube. Okay, let's go. I want to talk about something that came up during my recent videos where I had a social media poll about, if you had only these choices, what would be the next film adaptation of a video game you'd like to see next? And the options were Metroid, Half-Life, Horizon, or Galaga. As I said in my videos, let me say something here right off the bat. I do not believe that a video game can only be worthwhile if it can be adapted into something else like a film. I don't believe that. But nonetheless, I want to address the question of, okay, Barry, how would you make a film based on Galaga? Just kind of talking right off, top of my head, some of the first things that come to mind. I think, like I said in a previous video, when I think of that game, one of the first things I think of is, yes, the darkness of space, but also a whole lot of color. And I would actually try to kind of lean into that aesthetic. For some of my films, I made a film called Hollywood Trash and another one called The Infinitely Generous Francis Victus. I know for me, when I think of those films, one of the first things I think of is how colorful they are. And that was intentional, especially with Hollywood Trash. But you see, I've made these other films too, like Kin or this new one called Lures from the Light, which are not bright and colorful because the tone is completely different. But Galaga, I would try to, take a little bit of a serious approach, but also, I would want to have a lot of fun with it because I think Galaga is an awesome, very fun game. And I'd want the aesthetic to be, pretty true to that. But okay, without thinking too much about it, here's some of the first things I would think of if I were to make a film adaptation out of Galaga. So like we said, there's really no plot, there's no identified character. I would address the concept that, when I'm playing Galaga, when I think of Galaga, I think of the fact that just like a lot of video games, and certainly video games of the era it came out in, I think of high scores. That's one of your goals playing that game is, trying to get a pretty good score. So I'd incorporate that element into my version of the film. So I'd start with a character who is pretty great at blasting the aliens or the space monsters, whatever they are. I would start with a character who's really great at that. Well, okay, hang on. I can play around with the idea of, I don't know if they start that way, where they start as the best, or if they kind of become that way. I don't know. We can mess around with that kind of thing. But I think, at some point it'd be kind of interesting if the character became very arrogant. I think it'd be interesting if that's how they handled being the best. Kind of like, if you were to get a high score in the game, this character would be getting kind of like a high score by, being so good at blasting the space monsters. But instead of being like humble about it or respectful, perhaps this would be a character who is actually kind of arrogant about it. And I'm not trying to say that everyone who gets a high score in a video game is arrogant about it, but I'm saying in this particular idea I'm having, that might be where I would go with it. I think it could be neat for a bunch of reasons. I think it'd be interesting for some storytelling opportunities. I also think it's a little unexpected. I just think it's kind of an interesting element of the concept, the entire concept of Galaga, that I think would be kind of fun to play around with. So however they get there, let's call, them being the best. Let's call this character being the best at blasting away the aliens or the monsters, whatever they are. However they get there, let's call that a critical point in what will follow in the character's arc. And one of the cool results and side effects of that is, starting at that level, the character actually now has, hopefully, if you want the character to have a kind of a positive character arc, this character now actually has a lot of room to grow. I don't think you always have to have a character who's super, super likable, at least not throughout the entire film. People make mistakes, people do all kinds of different things, but they're people. And certainly I've made films where, the morality of the character, things like that are kind of gray, because that's often a lot of how life actually is. And I think it actually can be very relatable. In some of my movies, like The Infinitely Generous Francis Victus, I won't tell you the trajectory of some of those character arcs, but certainly in a film like Sponge, and again, you should check that out if you haven't seen it yet so I don't spoil it for you, I would not say that character has a very positive character arc. And that's intentional. That was intentional to the point of that movie. In this case, I would probably have this character have a positive character arc. And the terms like positive and negative character arcs, that can get kind of confusing, especially like, are we talking about morality or are we talking about something else? In this particular conversation, in this particular instance, I'm talking about a character who kind of ends up being positive for themselves and the people around them, generally speaking. Like I said, this is a character who's kind of arrogant, maybe even a little mean, and kind of looks down at everyone else around them. But by the end of the film, they are a lot more humbled and a lot more respectful, and all kinds of traits like that kind of end up evolving over the course of the film. I know for me, I would personally dig a story like that. So back to the starting point for this character. This is a character who, you know, in the Space Federation, or, you know, whatever is, you know, kind of like the big, I guess, military group that, you know, the main character is with their spaceship. This character might even be considered the best at doing that. The best pilot, the best shooter, everything like that. When you're playing that game, you are this, you know, little starship. I would make the starship obviously a very big deal in regards to the film and the plot. I'd even do something where, like, the main character's identity is entirely wrapped up in not just how great they are, but, you know, kind of wrapped up in the starship. Meaning they would think they are nothing without that starship. So those would be what I would call pressure points within the character I would address. I would do something where, like, the starship gets destroyed or something, or the main character loses the starship. Maybe there's this big great battle and the main character, for almost the first time in their lives, the main character loses the battle and maybe even loses the starship. Maybe they crash on, you know, a deserted planet or something like that, and they really kind of feel like they have nothing. And now they have to kind of build themselves up again, maybe even, you know, find a way to fix the ship or something. Maybe they never even, they only know how to use the ship. They know how to, you know, fire the weapons. They know nothing about the maintenance of the ship or anything like that. They've never had to do that. Now this main character has to, in order to get back to try to save everyone. And then does the main character save the day or not? I don't know. I guess I'd have to think about that a little bit. But elements, like I just said, that's the kind of stuff I would at least start with if I were to make a script and you know, kind of go from there. I told you in a previous video, I like to think of, you know, when I'm making something, I like to think of character, I like to, you know, think of story. I also like to think of themes. And certainly if it's something that's based on something else, I like to try to think of, you know, kind of the core themes of whatever, you know, the source was, but also my take on it. And certainly how I feel and how I think, you know, other people like you, the audience, how you might feel when you think of the source material, but then adapted into something else that hopefully could kind of stand on its own. I would definitely want to incorporate the original music from the game. Maybe, you know, throughout the film, there's like a synthesized version of the theme. Other times, maybe there's like an orchestral version of the theme. I don't know. We might, I like doing that kind of thing anyway. So maybe we'd play around with something like that. I want to get back to this aesthetic that I would try to do for this one, of incorporating a decent amount of color. I think there's so many films, and there's nothing wrong with this. I think there's so many films that just have this, you know, very, very dark tone to them. It has to be very, very, very serious. And if you have any color, it can't possibly be serious. I don't know if I personally believe that. And I'm not positive that it's necessary. I probably want the color palette to be incorporating all kinds of different elements, all kinds of different colors, which is not the way a lot of films look today. But that's what I would probably do. I also would probably make it be, you know, kind of a team of star pilots. I don't know if they all would be considered the main characters, but, you know, I think it wouldn't just be maybe one person. Although if you went in that direction, that could be kind of interesting too. Shucks, I like that enough. I might just make something based on that. Obviously, it won't be called Galaga, but that at least might be a starting point for me for something else. And can I just say, me and one of my screenwriting friends were talking about this the other day. Don't have any shame into the inspiration for where your film ideas and story ideas and that kind of thing come from. Let's stop with the shame with that. I know my pal, and you know exactly who you are, has this idea for a kind of time travel movie that the inspiration came from a film saga that's relatively popular. I actually say it's very, very popular. And I would definitely argue that is okay. But my friend has this very interesting angle he wants to kind of explore. That the saga, which I don't know if they're going to make any more entries in the saga, it currently does not explore that. But you know who you are, and your idea is really, really awesome, and you should share it with the whole world. But yeah, I think it's generally all good. And by the way, if you're an aspiring screenwriter or you want to get into writing or anything like that, and you have no idea where to begin, or even if you have been doing it for a while, personally, I recommend the books Save the Cat by Blake Snyder, Save the Cat Strikes Back by Blake Snyder, and Story by Robert McKee. At least getting started with those three. Fantastic, fantastic books. I don't get any kind of like kickback or anything by saying all that, all right? That's just that's Barry's personal recommendations to you. All right, that's going to do it. But before I'm out of here, leave me a comment and tell me, what do you think is your favorite, if you had to pick one, a favorite 1980s arcade game? For me, it's definitely going to be Galaga. I think Pole Position is up there too. Growing up in Gaithersburg, there used to be a restaurant called Joe's, and they had a pole position game on the bottom level. Love playing that. Gotta love Pac-Man. Let me know. See ya.